Welcome back to all participants of a webinar series conducted by Department of Physics, Saint Philomena College, Puttur, in association with the Pilikula Regional Science Center. On Tuesday, there is the day before yesterday, we had a lecture by Professor A.P. Bhatt. The title of his talk was Bhumiya Bugari Tirugata. And yesterday, we had a wonderful webinar on exoplanets and extraterrestrial life by Atul Bhatt, Assistant Professor in PPC Udupi. Today with us Professor T.N. Keshava, retired principal and also HOD of Physics, SDM College, Ujire. Professor T.N. Keshava is a good friend of me and he's the well-known physics teacher in this area. He's a voracious reader. You find him always with the books. He read one or the other book, and not only reading the book, he used to say what exactly that book content and the interaction with the students. And today he is going to speak on a curious topic. That is his title of the topic is Curious Questions, Cautious Answers. ಪ್ರಶ್ನೆಗಳು ಎಲ್ರಿಗೂ ಬರ್ತದೆ. ಕೇಳಿದ ಪ್ರಶ್ನೆ ಬಹಳ ಸರಳ ಅಂತೇಳಿ ಕಂಡ್ರು ಕೂಡ ಅದನ್ನ ಉತ್ತರಿಸುವುದು ಬಹಳ ಕಷ್ಟ. ಗಹನವಾದ ಸತ್ಯದ ಹುಡುಕಾಟ ಪ್ರಾಯಶಃ ಅದರಲ್ಲಿ ಇರ್ತದೆ. ಅದೆಲ್ಲವನ್ನ ಅವರು ಇನ್ನು ಮುಂದಿನ ಒಂದು 45 ನಿಮಿಷಗಳ ಕಾಲ ವೆಬಿನಾರ್ ನಲ್ಲಿ ನಮ್ಮೊಂದಿಗೆ ಮಾತನಾಡ್ತಾರೆ. ಹೌ ದ ಕ್ವೆಶ್ಚನ್ಸ್ asked by the different people and they try to find the answers that led to the probably development of the whole knowledge sphere and the science. With these words, I welcome Professor T.N. Keshava for this particular webinar series. Welcome you, sir, and now it is for you to present. Thank you.
Thank you. It's my pleasure to thank in advance Dr. A.P. Radhakrishna, Dr. K.V. Rao, and all other listeners for providing me this opportunity to share some of my ideas with you. Why I chose this topic? The topic is curious questions, cautious answers. Why I chose this topic is the main reason for this is that I myself had several such questions almost every day. For example, few days back, we thought of buying a new car. And when we went to the showroom, there were some cars which had tires with higher radius, and they were looking very elegant. And my family members, they were also impressed by the tire size. Bigger the tire, the vehicle looks more elegant. So they were telling, oh, that car looks very elegant. Should we go for it? Then I started asking why this idea was not there earlier. Why did the earlier cars did not have larger tires? This was the question. So for that, I asked the technicians there in the showroom. Very surprisingly, they did not have the answer. They said that higher the radius, the ride comfort will be better. One reason is fine. When the radius of the tire is greater, it can easily pass through the potholes so that people inside will not feel the jerk. That is definitely there. But why is that the same simple idea was not used in the earlier cars? Why it is a fashion these days? And is it of any use? This was my doubt. So I searched many websites, and many of them, they don't give any specific answer because a lot of physics is involved in that, and therefore when they answer certain difficult questions, they try to answer it as if it is to be understood by ordinary men, and that becomes difficult for them. So I researched into this topic and found very interesting answers. The answers were higher the tire radius, the tire part, rubber part becomes less, and the metal part, rim part becomes more. This is one interesting thing. Then I asked the people in the showroom, why is this? Larger the tire, smaller is the rubber part. They didn't know the answer. But the interesting answer is this. When the car takes a sudden turn, the centrifugal force will be applied on the car also, so that there is every chance, if the speed is very high, there is every chance that the rubber part of the tire may slip out of the disc. That will increase with the radius, because that centrifugal force depends on the radius. Greater the radius, greater is the effect of the centrifugal force, so that when you take a sharp turn, there is every chance that the tire will slip out of the rim, and that will be a big problem. And to avoid that, what these manufacturers do is that when the tire size, radius increases, they decrease the rubber part, so that the chance of the tire slipping out of the disc becomes less. But still, in spite of such a change, 57% of the car tires having higher radius, they had bent rims. 57%. 57% of the car tires had problems with the rim, particularly when the tire radius is higher. That's obviously because of centrifugal force. And this is the reason why when the size of the tire, radius increases, the rubber part goes on decreasing. Because of this compulsion, the ride quality becomes bumpy. So in a way, when you go for a car with a higher tire with higher radius, there is no much advantage as far as ride quality is concerned. This is something I think many of people, even in showrooms, they do not know this. So I think the questions that sometimes we ask ourselves, for which the answers are very interesting. So I thought, let this be made a topic for the seminar, and that is why I chose this particular topic. Then coming back to the main subject, curious questions. What are curious questions? Curious questions are the questions which can be asked by a common man, and assumingly it is interesting. This is what I mean by a curious question. There are thousands of curious questions in almost every subject, every branch of knowledge. In physics, their numbers are higher. Some of the questions which I would like to present in this topic some of them belong to astronomy, some of them even belong to kitchen. For example, when we watch cricket match, people are fond of potato chips. That is why sometimes people are also called couch potato. One day I wanted to prepare the chips myself and went to the kitchen, started putting this potato chips into oil. I was using coconut oil. And when the chips were fried, I took it out and saw that almost 50% of the chips were very soft. They were not crispy. This was a big question. This question came to my mind almost 10 years back. So I asked people who are in home science department, I asked them, what is the reason that when I prepare potato chips using coconut oil, the chips are softer, not crispy? Then they searched all their resources and told me, the potato that you used is not the right one. You should go for the potato which is meant for chips only. And such potatoes do exist actually. I too know that such potatoes do exist, where the water content in the potato is much less. And some methods, nowadays there are a lot of websites that give detailed video about how to prepare a potato chips. But at that time, 10 years back, it was not there. So they said, it is the type of the potato that is important. You should have a potato with less water content, then only you will get crispy chips. Then I searched in the market, there is nothing like a different type of potato meant for chips only. It was not there, but it was probably there in supermarkets. And somebody also told me that the starch content in the chips, that will make the chips softer. So it has to be removed. It has to be put into cold water then it has to be dried, and then the chips have to be prepared. But I think this is a very tedious job. No chip maker will ever try that, right? So I spent almost 5 years searching for the reason. Why is that my chips are softer, not crispy? But finally, I got the answer in physics and chemistry. That's an interesting thing. The correct exact reason for the soft chips is that the oil that I was using was coconut oil. Coconut oil has a smoking temperature of 175 degrees centigrade. Smoking temperature is slightly different from boiling point. It is smoking temperature is higher than boiling point, but by 1 or 2 degrees. Say, for example, coconut oil has a smoking point of around 175 degrees Celsius, whereas refined sunflower oil has a smoking point. You can even call it as a boiling point because they are very close to each other, of 230 degrees Celsius. Coconut oil 175 degrees Celsius, and this refined sunflower oil 230 degrees Celsius. This makes a huge difference. And when I tried preparing potato chips using refined sunflower oil, the chips were very crispy. My 10-year question about how to prepare crispy chips was answered just by the concept of almost boiling point of oil. That was not known to even culinary experts. They were giving many reasons for soft chips. And another important thing is that the virgin oil that we talk about also contains other elements other than the fats that also causes the chips to be softer. And that is why to prepare good quality chips, you should go for refined oils, preferably sunflower oil, so that your potato chips will be very crispy. So my 10-year-old question was answered just by a mere concept of smoking point or almost boiling point of the oil. So that is why I think the fundamental questions that we usually ask in our everyday life need valid answers. And such fundamental questions are plenty. Newton, it is very interesting. Millions, I would like to put that slide here. Newton, millions saw the apple fall. Newton was the only one to ask why. Just because Newton asked that question why, the entire branch of physics developed into the modern science. This is the most interesting thing. Why is that the people before Newton did not ask? Probably I think they were not curious. They were not particular about their questions. And that is why Newton's one question changed the entire branch of science. This is most beautiful. Therefore, the questions that we ask today, the questions that the audience may ask today, may actually open up a new branch of science as a whole. Then some of the questions which I felt very interesting that I would like to share today. One is that about atoms. We know atoms are extremely small. If you place 10 crore atoms side by side, it becomes 1 centimeter. So extremely small structures. And more than 99% of the mass of the atom is in the nucleus. And nucleus is an extremely small quantity, extremely small structure. Millions of times smaller than the atom. For example, if you consider Earth as the nucleus, then the first electron will be 7 times far away than Pluto, planet Pluto. If Earth is the nucleus of an atom, let us say hydrogen atom. If Earth is the nucleus of the hydrogen atom, then the first electron will be 7 times farther away from planet Pluto. That means there is a large gap between the nucleus and the electron, or in a way, the atom as a whole is almost empty, about which we spoke probably in the last seminar organized by the Saint Philomena College about vacuum. So atom as a whole, if you consider, is almost like vacuum because much of the mass of the atom is in the nucleus. So when two atoms come close to one another, will they be touching each other? This was the fundamental question. Is it possible that two atoms can touch each other? This was the question. And this question has a very long, elaborate, interesting answer. Say, for example, if you look at the picture here, the nucleus is at the center. This is the old picture. This is the classical picture of the atom, wherein the nucleus is at the center and electrons move around the nucleus. And in PUC, we have studied that this electron is moving around the nucleus at great speeds.
Sir, 1 minute, sir.
Yes.
The screen can't picture. Probably you are not shared the presentation.
1 minute, right?
Now it is coming.
Okay. Even the picture is visible.
No, just share presentation.
Share presentation online. No, I'm not finding that particular. No problem. Okay, and just continue with the talk.
Okay.
So the atom as a whole appears to be almost like a vacuum.
Sir, it was visible earlier.
Okay.
I think you have to just that reverse. Yes, sir.
Is it visible
Yes,
now?
Now it is visible.
Okay, right. So the nucleus is at the center and the electron moves around in different orbits. This is the Bose picture. And if you calculate the speed, velocity of the electron in the first orbit, it comes to around almost 1/10th of the speed of light. That means the atoms present in your body or my body, much of that is water, and water contains hydrogen atom. And each electron in that hydrogen atom is moving at a speed almost comparable to the speed of light, not 1/10, sorry, 1/100th of the speed of light. Every electron in your body moves with the speed of 1/100th of the speed of light. This is amazing. That means you are made of particles which are moving at great speeds and still you are at rest. This is an interesting thing. So then I asked that question, why is that? Say, if this is the thing, why this movement is not felt by us? We have in our body, there is about 10 to the power of 27 atoms. It may change from person to person, but on an average, there are about 10 to the power of 27 atoms in our body. And in that case, if each and every electron is moving with the velocity 1/100th of the velocity of light, then the entire picture is extremely complicated. We are stationary things made of moving bodies. This is a very ridiculous situation. And does it really happen? For that, I think we should go to the next description of atom, that is the quantum description. When the atom is described quantum mechanically, the idea that electron is a particle, it moves around the nucleus, doesn't exist at all. Instead, we define electrons and all atomic structures by using a wave function. So what was once a orbit, like the orbit of the planet around the nucleus, is now a probability pattern. That means instead of orbits, now we define a term called orbitals. Orbitals are the regions around these atoms where the probability of finding the electron is very high. Then this probability picture is extremely difficult to comprehend. the real world around us, which appears so real, so beautiful, all of a sudden now appears that the chance factor is coming in. The real world appears to be chancy. Why this is the situation? And if this is the case, does two atoms touching each other have any meaning? This is the interesting thing. Say, by the meaning of wave function, it is clear that an electron can be at any place in the universe, theoretically, any place in the universe. So in that way, the question whether two atoms can touch each other doesn't come into picture at all, because every atom theoretically touches every other atom, because wave function, probability wave function extends up to infinity. Only the density with which the probability of finding the electron is more, that will be at a smaller place. That means atom, almost 95% of the atom occupies a very small place. Whereas the true atom probably, I think, extends beyond the horizons of the earth also. So in that way, we can say that every atom is touching every other atom. That is the meaning. And second thing is that, then what does touching actually mean? Say when I touch a table, when I touch a pen, what does it mean then? The real life description is very interesting. Say when I touch the pen, what is happening in the atomic level? This is an interesting question. Whether the electromagnetic force exerted by the atoms present in my hand and the atoms present in the pen, how do they interact? This is an interesting question. Now, three things can happen. One, strictly speaking, atoms of this pen are actually touching atoms of my hand and the rest of the world, theoretically speaking, because the wave function by which we define the atoms, the electrons present in this pen, they extend up to infinity. They are everywhere. But strictly speaking, 95% of the probability of finding the electron around the nucleus is at a very small place. That is the atomic size, almost 1/20th of the angstrom unit in case of a hydrogen atom. That is a very small place. So in that very small place, the orbitals of hydrogen atom, they may be closer to orbitals of some other atom. And there is chance that the two orbitals can overlap. And this overlapping can lead to different consequences. For example, if the atoms come very close to one another, for example, hydrogen atom, they will form hydrogen molecule. So the distance changes. When the distance decreases, the hydrogen atom combines to form hydrogen molecule. Whereas when I touch the pen, such things are not happening. And exact physical touching has no meaning in the quantum world, because reality, quantum objects like say electron, they are not solid structures. They are defined only using wave function, and wave function is basically mathematical in nature. So the reality around us, the world around us, can be described mathematically and not physically. Wave function is a mathematical entity, including spin, angular momentum. They are mathematical entities. Whereas what we call the electron going around the nucleus is just an assumption. Now the difficulty is that some people usually ask the question, when this quantum world is incomplete, you cannot give a beautiful description about the real world. But the answer is not that. Real world itself is a limitation. But the real world is made that way to make us comprehend the world. We can feel this world by making this approximation. So the meaning of the word real world is actually an approximation. That is why the quantum mechanical description, even though that doesn't appear to be realistic, is actually more meaningful. So in that way, say for example, if the wave function of an atom, when I touch, say for example, the pen, interacts with the wave function of the wave functions of atoms present in my pen as well as the hand, they may mix up. This is one thing. Second thing is that what is there between orbitals? Say there are many orbitals in an atom. What is there in between the orbitals? Is it an empty space? Again, that question comes into picture. Again, the thing is that it is not an empty space, because the electromagnetic interaction, that is the interaction between the electron and the nucleus, takes place using the electromagnetic force, that is through the exchange of photons. And these photons we call virtual photons. And these virtual photons are being constantly exchanged between the electron and the nucleus. And that is what we call the electromagnetic force that makes the atom possible. So what we call the empty space between orbitals is actually filled with a swarm of virtual photons. So in that way, we can't say that the space between the orbitals is empty space. World is a very mysterious space. This is one thing. And second thing is that, say, if the atom as a whole is almost like a vacuum, electron is not a solid. Don't be under the impression that electron is a solid. Electron is not a solid. It is again a quantum object. Only when you find it out, it will have a specific maybe mass, specific structure. If you don't identify the electron, that will be around the orbit. It can be anywhere in the orbit. So the orbit itself is an electron in a way. It is not the path. It is not the path. We still sometimes feel that orbital is the path around which the electron goes around the nucleus. It is not. It is the position where the probability of finding the electron is very high. That much only. There is no localization. Once you consider electron as an orbital, that locality is lost. It becomes a spread out entity having a definite, let us say, frequency. And if you square that probability, then we get the reality. Or that is what we call stationary quantity. Say for example, the wave function psi, if you square it, then what you get is a reality. So reality in a way is an approximation. One interesting thing, even though that doesn't look physical here, the great philosopher Plato, he lived almost 2,400 years from now. He was in a way 350 years senior to even Jesus Christ. So what he said was that we make this universe felt by assigning shapes to objects. Otherwise, understanding the world becomes difficult. Just like say wave function and probability of finding the particle, that is square of the wave function and all that. Say a table, by calling a table, it becomes easy for you to explain the world. And Plato called them, in his theory of forms. Plato has given a theory called theory of forms. By giving definite name to definite structures, we could explain the world around us in an easier way. That is probably one of the reasons why the real world, it can be easy to explain only if we assign them physical shapes, physical structures, physical forms. But actually, they do not have that. They are explained only through probabilities. It is not the weakness of the theory. The world itself is like that. To understand the world, then we have to transform this concept of wave function into something which can be understood by us. So this is the most interesting thing. So coming again back to that almost emptiness of the atom, why is that, say, we cannot pass through the wall? Even the wall is made of atoms. And if the atoms are empty, and we are also empty basically, more than 99% of the atoms in our body is empty space. Why can't we easily pass through the wall? This is the question. But the thing which comes into picture now is the electromagnetic force. There is a very strong repulsion between the electrons present in the atoms of the wall and the electrons present in my body. And because of this repulsion, it becomes impossible for us to pass through the wall. Whereas a chargeless entity like neutrino, which doesn't have any interaction, can comfortably pass through the wall as if it is air. So the solid wall, the repulsion, the things like passing through or not passing through, these have something to do with the electromagnetic force. Electromagnetic force is one of the strong forces. The nuclear force is in fact much stronger, but fortunately for us, it acts at a very, very small place. Otherwise, the entire world would have shrunk to a very small size. Even without Pauli's exclusion principle, the atoms in my body or your body would have collapsed to a much smaller place. It is because of the Pauli's exclusion principle, the electrons do not collapse. There are restrictions by Pauli's exclusion principle. So it is Pauli's exclusion principle that is responsible for the shape around us. Otherwise, the world would have been a much different place, much different shape. So these are some of the interesting things about atoms. And the picture that we usually give to our students in the classroom is basically of a picture of planets moving around the nucleus. I think this picture has to be changed. This picture is continuously being given in the classrooms even today, because to see reality, we want a picture. This is the problem. But the reality, particularly in the microscopic world, cannot be picturized. This is the problem. I think we should find some alternative to this description of atoms, probably in the future textbooks, particularly after the introduction of the new education policy. Next question is about the cameras. So if you go to the market these days, we get different cell phones with the different capacity of cameras. Some of the cameras have 48 megapixel capacity. Some even have 108 megapixel capacity. And what does this really mean? And will these mobile phone companies continue to create better and better mobile phones, so that maybe future mobile phones may contain thousands of megapixels? Is it possible? This is one interesting question. The answer for this is, say, the human eye. This is one of the extraordinary instruments that we have. The human eye is so good that it can identify more than million colors. You may ask me, there are only 7 colors, how can there be million colors? The combination of colors can be many. So the human eye is capable of identifying millions of colors. And coming back to the smallest recognizable energy, the human eye can also identify a single photon. It has got that much of sensitivity. Millions of colors can be identified. Even a single photon can be identified when there is total darkness by the eye. We have that extraordinary instrument called eye. And this eye has a resolution. If you search the internet and see, its maximum megapixel is 576. 576 is the maximum megapixel that your eye can perceive. But interestingly, when we see an object, we don't see the entire picture. We focus to a particular region. So strictly speaking, we are not using even 576 megapixel when we see a full picture. We will be seeing, in fact, we will be seeing 15 to 20 megapixel only when we see a particular portion of the picture. So that is why I think maybe, say, nowadays we have HD screen and then 4K screen, and 8K screens are also there in the market, 8K. Strictly speaking, theoretically, 8K comes to around 33 megapixel. That means I told earlier that the human eye can identify around 20 megapixel at a time, 15 to 20 megapixel maximum. So 4K picture, which is already there, the TVs which are already there in the market, theoretically speaking, they probably are the upper limit. So if you go for maybe 16K resolution screens, they are of no use at all, because that resolution cannot be perceived by the human eye. That is why I think 8K and at the maximum 16K is the maximum resolution the future TVs will have. Other than that, it is not possible. Even if they prepare, say, 64 megapixel TV screens, they are of no use, because you are only increasing the megapixel, but that cannot be recognized, identified by the human eye. That is why I think if you can go for a good quality 4K TV, that is quite good. You need not have to wait for 8K TV or 16K TV, because they are in a way not recognizable. These pixels are not recognizable by the human eye. This is an interesting thing which probably many of us come across when we go to purchase televisions. And then there are similar other questions that usually people come across during motoring in the night. Why is that the danger signal is always red? This is the question. Sometimes in physics, it has a very clear-cut answer. But some people say that represents blood, red color, so that you are alerted, so that you will identify that color quickly. These are the answers that you usually get. But the real thing is that red color, because its wavelength is more, it scatters less. So that means even when there is smoke, even when there is fog, the red color can easily pass through that smoke and it can reach the observer. And that's why even when there is heavy smog, as there is in Delhi, only the red color can effectively pass through that, so that you can identify the risk well in advance. That is the reason why danger light is always red. No other reason. It is not the color of the blood. And similarly, even in kitchen, we get some more interesting questions about, say, preparing the vada. Why is that there is a hole in the vada? Why is that big vadas are not prepared? Like the Tirupati Laddu, such vadas are not there. What is the reason? The reason is basically physical in nature. So when you immerse this batter, vada batter, into boiling oil, heat has to pass through inside the batter. And the thermal conductivity, equation of thermal conductivity gives us a hint that greater is the diameter of the vada, smaller is the heat entering inside. And that is why the inner portion of the vada doesn't get cooked quickly. So how this problem can be solved? This can be solved either by reducing the size of the vada to a smaller thing, or by making a hole at the center. So when you are making the hole at the center, the effective thickness through which the heat has to pass through becomes much less. And that is why it is not for a show that vada has a hole in it. It is for a particular scientific reason, so that every part of the vada should be cooked evenly. For that purpose, vada has a central hole. Even say a barbecue, when you barbecue a food, there is a metal rod in between. Metal is a very good conductor, so that, say, vegetables which are fixed to that metal rod, they will absorb heat quickly from that metal rod, so that the inner parts of the vegetable are boiled quickly. These not many such questions appear to us, particularly if we are very curious about things which are happening around us. So these are some of the questions which I found interesting, for which the answers probably are also interesting. I think almost I have spoken for about 40 minutes now. If any audience has a question to ask about the topics that we have discussed till now, they can do it, please. Yes. Yes, sir. Kannadadalli ಕೇಳ್ಬೋದು.
Yes, it is now left for the audience to ask the questions, or they have come across the incidences like the big tires which Professor Keshavatian has seen in the car showroom, and also why there is a hole in Nevada. Certainly, there are the various questions. Now it is left for the audience.
Sir, you said the atom means the new electron can exist anywhere.
Yeah, in the orbital. In the orbital. Yeah, actually, strictly speaking, it is existing throughout the universe.
Yeah, the old stuff means they say p orbital, d orbital, some orbitals are there.
Yeah.
But will it exist only there, or it can go anywhere?
It can be, but the probability of, for example, I will show that picture also. So this is that. This is the picture of chromium atom. I think you can see it on the screen.
Yes.
Is it? Yeah. So it is a very beautiful. It's almost like a beautiful rangoli. That shows a region where the probability of finding the electron is very high. That doesn't mean that electron is going around this like this rangoli pattern. That doesn't give that idea. So this picture is only a probability of picture. The probability of finding the electron is high in these regions. That doesn't mean that the electrons cannot be beyond this. Say, for example, tunneling. So in that tunneling, what appears to be almost impossible becomes very much possible. So there is another picture also. For example, this is the picture, actual picture of the atoms, actual picture of the atoms taken by the American University.
Okay.
Here you can see this spread out wave pattern. So the picture of electron going around the nucleus is an approximation. That is what human perception can imagine. To make things easier, we use that model. The model which I showed earlier, this model. Strictly speaking, this is not the real model. Electrons don't go around the nucleus like this.
Okay, but then if that is the case, then what new theories do they go into? I mean, like what new findings they can do by this method?
Yeah, but the thing is that, say, even though theoretically electron can exist beyond the borders of Earth, strictly speaking, almost 95% of the so-called atom, the probability of finding the atom is at a very small place. That matters. The remaining 5% that we call has extended up to space may not be of significance. So in reality, the 95% of the so-called structure of the atom exists at a very small place. That is what matters. So reality, strictly speaking, is uncertain. There is no certain border to the atom. There is no certain border.
That means that the real world is now due to the waves of the microscopic level particles, such as the electrons, or it may be any particles, and the overlapping of the waves and the probability that now makes the real world.
Yes. Real world is basically explained in quantum mechanics by squaring the wave function. What you get by squaring the wave function represents the real world. But strictly speaking, it is not the real world. It is the real world exposed to us through the mathematical procedures. We can comprehend them. Our brain is capable of comprehending such things, square of the wave function. The real wave function cannot be understood by human perception. So it is probably the limitation. In my opinion, the wave function clearly represents what an atom is. Square of the wave function is observable. But that is what we call stationary state. Stationary state. But to experience the world, I think we have to use that square of the wave function. That is a limitation, probably a limitation of human perception.
Sir, means if there are so many atoms.
Yeah.
Okay. Means all are this one intertwined, something like that.
Yeah, as I told you, that say wave function can extend up to infinity. That means each and every atom is theoretically spread out into the entire world. But in reality, more than 95% of the total so-called probability of finding the atom is at a very small place. So atom can be considered as localized. That can be localized. That's true. Questions you have ಕೇಳಬಹುದು.
What I wanted to ask is,
Yes.
this like you're telling, it is like a totally different, like how we studied in school and all in around 20 years back, 25 years back, the model, the atom of the model of the atom. Now it is totally different.
Yeah.
So does it?
Yeah, it's really.
Yeah. Like it is, what I heard from you, I just hearing it today itself.
Oh.
I did not know that it is totally different.
Okay.
So how does it help in understanding that the universe, what we look at, is same or it is something else?
No, actually, for a better understanding of the universe, I think these ideas are very essential. The observations that we make in the real world, they are basically approximations. That doesn't work out in the microscopic level. For example, the solid electron that we speak about, that we perceive about, is actually not a solid. Electron can exist at two places at the same time. This is wonderful. A single electron can be at two places at the same time. So what is absurd for common man becomes real in the quantum world.
Okay.
A single electron can be at two places at the same time.
Quantum world is usually looks absurd.
Yes, yes.
For in the real world.
Even for science teachers, this world looks fuzzy, not very clear. Clarity is an approximation. Clarity is an approximation. Without that approximation, we cannot explain the real world. This is the thing. And to explain the real world, much of the real world, Newton's laws are quite sufficient, quite good. But when you go to the microscopic level, Newton's laws are no longer holding good. The real picture of the atom is what I gave a few minutes back.
And
that is difficult for the teachers to tell the same to the students. That is a problem. That is why in the high schools or even in PUC, the realistic model is given, not the quantum mechanical model.
Okay, I think that needs to be changed.
It has to be. That has to be, because there is no option. Quantum world is the better description of the real world. In a way, more complete description of the real world.
Okay. Does it even help in does it help in this Higgs boson theory also?
That is a altogether different concept. Higgs boson is about, say, evolution of the universe, how matter originated from massless particles. That comes in that. That's a different concept. But for the formation of atoms, the real world, Higgs boson is essential.
Okay. Like, is there any probability that even they may find something which is even smaller than a Higgs boson particle or something like that?
That the small or the big doesn't actually come into picture at all. For example, in a way, if you consider wavelength is considered as the size.
Atom was considered undividable. Then they found out that
no longer. Subatomic particles like, say, proton, neutron, electrons, they are subatomic particles. Much smaller than the atom. And even the protons, neutrons, they are also made of still smaller structures called quarks.
Okay.
And these quarks finally are again made of virtual particles. So the entire real world, in a way, at some level, appears to be virtual,
Virtual reality.
virtual reality. Reality is a perception, definitely, no doubt about that.
Okay.
The image is created in your brain actually, with all approximations.
You are going too philosophical.
Yes. No, that's the reality actually.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I can understand his difficulty. So that say these concepts are difficult for a teacher to put
No,
forward.
but when you go into the microscopic level, many times we come with problem. For
Yes,
example, the spin of electron.
yes.
When you take it into account of it is like something like a spinning ball or a spinning top, it gives some picture. But in reality, it is not like the spinning ball.
Now,
So many
interesting
things are
about,
there.
say, sir told about spin. No? So, if you want to explain spin in English sentences,
Hmm.
the spin half means to complete one rotation, the electron has to complete two rotations. This is the meaning. That is apparently absurd.
Oh.
The
And
spin
also
is also a
the
quantum quality. Yeah.
particles. For
Hmm.
example, Newton's law, it is a approximation.
Yes,
In reality, it is the Einstein's relativity is
yes,
some sort of a gives the. It may be also a approximation.
yeah,
Particle which is moving with a very high velocity, its
yes,
momentum changes, not the mass.
yes,
Earlier, it is said to be the mass changes, but now it is the clear picture is the momentum changes.
yes. Say, for example, say, look at this strange property of particles. Say, for example, if there are two entangled particles, we can, in a way, in a common man's language, we can call it as the connected particles. If there are two entangled particles, if you change one property of a particle, the other particle, even if it is separated by a very long distance, maybe infinity, that will change its orientation accordingly. The question is, how did that particle know?
Now, I had a thought of that when you used to say that regarding the wave function.
Yes,
Is it this quantum entanglement is due to the probability of the wave function of this electron and that electron, which is now happens?
may not be, because in that case, the speed has to go beyond the velocity of light. That is
Then
the
how to explain that?
explained using Heisenberg's uncertainty principle.
Mhm.
It's not very clear to me also, not very clear, but it is explained basically using uncertainty principle. So in a way, I think the real world, which appears so real, so solid, at one particular stage appears very fuzzy, very strange.
Yeah, in all that strangeness, there are the questions, and
Yeah,
we try to find the answers, and that answers also gives now arises the more questions.
yes.
Friends, now we come to the end of this beautiful webinar session. It is said that the science or the knowledge begin with the questions, and we try to get the answers. Actually, when we are all children, we have a lot of questions, and we were used to ask questions with our parents and then elders and people nearby. But as we grow and become elders, questions become lesser. That does not mean we know the answers. Probably we feel shy to ask questions and trying to get answers. But always it is better to ask questions regarding the various phenomena happens surrounding us, so that we'll get the clear picture regarding the surrounding nature, or we will get the clear picture of the reality, what said by Professor T.N. Keshava. In fact, his last webinar, still I am remember, Irudella Bittu, regarding the vacuum, and this is the extension of that. He is like a philosopher. I had a lot of discussion whenever I used to go to SDM College, Vijay, and he says what are the new books I have read and what are the things in the books, and also the lot of discussions. And it is actually voracious reader. You can see in the presentation of this particular webinar. Thank you, sir. You have given the wonderful picture of the reality, and also the significance of asking questions which lead us to the see the knowledge. Thank you on behalf of the college and all the participants.
Thank you.
Friends, tomorrow we will have the webinar on the remote sensing satellite and the application by Dr. Gangadhar Bhatt, who was a retired professor in the Department of Marine Geology of Mangalore University. He will be going to speak on the remote sensing satellite and its application. And let us join at exactly 3 o'clock tomorrow. Thank you.